Recording here. Aristeo, what's up, man?
Baruch Hashem, how are you, Rabbi?
Pretty good. Good to see you. Bella.
Likewise.
How's it going? Bella. Dan, where are you right now?
I'm let's see, like West 90, heading to Scotia, New York, to load Rabbi Schneer's favorite brand of kosher seltzer, Adirondack brand.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. Everything from the Adirondacks is great. By the way, Adirondacks, the Adirondack mountain range, I just want to say something. The Adirondack mountain range in New York is beautiful. I used to grow there as a kid. And in Hebrew, Adirondack, if you break up the words, is Adir. Well, it's a mix of Hebrew and Yiddish. Adir undak. Adir undak. Adir means beautiful. Un means and. Dak means refined. It's a very beautiful and refined mountain range in New York. It's gorgeous. If you know Mark Twain, he would hang out over there. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Dan. Moishi, good to see you, man. Well, good to see your name. It's good to be back. I think I had COVID. I have allergies, but you're here to learn. Not here to listen to me vent and yent. Okay, we're moving along in Havadallah, the laws of Havadallah. And my question today.
Sorry, Rabbi.
Oh, Moishi, go to it.
I was trying to.
Yeah.
I was trying to hit on mute. And
yeah, that's always like
working.
The best thing, you know. It's like you catch someone sleeping. You're like, oh.
Yeah. You look good. You look good. I'm glad you're doing better.
No. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Moish. Thanks for your wishes too. It's good to see you. Okay, everybody. Today, just gonna move along. Moving on with Havadallah. So the question I posed today was, are you ever allowed to make Havadallah before Shabbos ends? And the answer is yes, you can. Or how is that possible? Well, you have to understand what Mariv is, and we'll talk a little bit about time, not from a Kabbalistic perspective, which is always great, but from a very practical, perspective. Like, what is time? How does time work? I'm not going to go into great detail, but talk about one aspect of time. So the Rabbi Yoshia says in the Gemara, Rabbi Yoshia, he would daven Mariv while it was still Shabbos. So he would daven Mariv while it was still Shabbos. So Shabbos comes out at 9 p.m. Probably at 8 p.m., he was already davening Mariv. However, it did not mean he was able to do malacha. He was not able to perform acts which are forbidden according to the Torah on Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe, who wrote his own Shulchan Aruch, called Shulchan Aruch Harav, which a lot of Chassidim use. Most of the Alter Rebbe's works on the Shulchan Aruch, on Jewish law, were burned in a fire. Imagine how devastating that was, how much time it took. And there was no printing. Printing was extremely expensive, so they didn't print. So we actually have very little of what the Alter Rebbe wrote, but this part we do have. So Alter Rebbe paskins, he holds, he writes, he sends psak, he made a law. What does he say? Based upon this Gemara, that if someone has an oinus is against your will. In other words, something is going against you. You're in a dire situation. Now, what does dire mean is up for discussion. But here's an example. And he will not be able to make Havadallah after Shabbos for whatever reason. He's not going to be in a situation where he can make Havadallah after Shabbos. He's allowed to pray Mariv, recite Havadallah with a cup of wine from the time of Plag HaMincha and onwards, even while it's still Shabbos. Now, what does that mean? What is Plag HaMincha? Here in Detroit, in our community, West Bloomfield, I should say. We don't live in Detroit, we live in West Bloomfield. In our area, and a lot of communities around the world, Shabbos comes in nightfall comes in very late, like 9:20, 9:30. Now, most people are not going to be able to daven. They don't want to come to shul at 9:30, after they had their meal and they're hanging around for a couple hours to come to shul. It's kind of like, it's difficult for a lot of people. In Crown Heights, Borough Park, where you're able to just walk to shul, there's a shul right next to your house and these types of things. People, they'll do it, not a problem. But here, we got to basically drive more or less to shul. I live a little less than a mile away, whatever, to get up and roll out after I put my kids to bed and like ate a bunch of, egg rolls and whatever Chinese food. I'm not like so interested in coming. And that sentiment is shared with many people here. So what you can do is you can daven mincha before plag ha-mincha, which I'll explain what that is. And then you can daven marv right away after that, which means it's still light outside. Now, what is plag ha-mincha? And why can you do that? So what we spoke about last week, there is a disagreement, a machlokes in the Gemara, in the Talmud. When is sunset? When is the time of sunset? So in one Gemara Shabbos, that talks about Shabbos, Masechta Shabbos, in one of these books over here, it says Shabbos is 2/3 of how long it takes to walk 1 mil. 1 mil is about what did we say, 24 minutes, 18 minutes? So I'm sorry. The question is, how long does it take from sunset to nightfall? So according to one opinion, it's 18 minutes. According to another opinion, it's 72 minutes. Now, how is that possible? How do they have this disagreement? That's what it says in the Gemara. And then the conclusion is, Rabbeinu Tam holds that it takes 72 minutes to go from Mincha to Marv. And and therefore, he takes in Shabbos later, and Shabbos ends much later, and yada yada. Unlike us, we take in Shabbos. Shabbos ends pretty early. I want to close the door. Okay. Rabbeinu Tam will actually say there are multiple sunsets and there are multiple nightfalls. And what does that mean? Well, there's different phases of darkness throughout the night. Yeah, like as soon as the sun sets, that's one level of darkness. The sun comes down a little bit more. There's another level of darkness. Right, it gets a little bit more darker. You can see more stars as the night progresses because it gets darker and darker. There's a famous Hasidic line. Actually, it's from the Gemara. I think it's from the Talmud. It says, when is the darkest time of the night? Right before it's about to become sunrise. That's the darkest time of the night. So anytime you're in a dark situation, the darker it is, you're just moments away from a moment of light. So there's a disagreement as to when there's multiple sunsets. Now, Plaga Mincha, there's the period of time between sunset and nightfall is a very mystical time. Just want to know who's making all that noise. It's Rabbi Schneer. Always comes in at this time when I'm giving a class and makes a lot of noise. The time between the twilight, that's what we call it, twilight. The time between sunset and nightfall is a very mystical time, like we spoke about before. We don't exactly know how long it takes for that period to happen. And it says that Plaga Mincha, there's two types. There's Mincha Katana, there's Plaga Mincha. Plaga Mincha is 1 1/4 hour before nightfall. Says an opinion in the Talmud. I know this is a lot of information, but it's recorded and you can listen to it again. You can ask me a million questions. It says an opinion in the Talmud. One opinion says you can daven Mariv, you can pray the Mariv prayer at Plag HaMincha while it's still light out. The other opinion is that you can daven Mariv, you can't daven Mariv until nightfall. Why is that? Why can you daven while the light is still out? Because prayer is connected to karbanis and offerings, the temple service. So the one opinion, it's according to the temple service. Each prayer, Shachris, Mincha, and Marav, are connected to the prayer service in the service in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple. Mariv, what is Mariv connected to? One opinion says that Mariv is connected to Karbonis, and you can offer Karbonis until nightfall, meaning you can burn them until nightfall. And according to another opinion, Mariv is connected to the Ketoris, specifically the Ketoris offering, which has to be completed by the 1 1/4 hour before nightfall. Yeah. So you have Ketoris, which can only be done 1 1/4 hours before nightfall. And then you have another opinion it's according to Garbanis. And what happens is in the temple, they would shecht an animal, slaughter an animal, put it onto the holy mizbeach, onto the altar, and they can be burned throughout the night. They have until the morning, until right before the morning, until dawn to burn. The most ideal is to try to do it within a couple hours of the nighttime. If not, they have until the afternoon. Till midnight. But if really things are very hectic that day, they have a lot of karbanis, they don't know how many karbanis, how many offerings they're going to get in a single night, in a single day. Maybe the entire city, the entire country of Ethiopia is going to come and give a bunch of offerings. So it can take a long period of time. That's why, by the way, I just want to tell you something. In the Gemara of Brachas, the Talmud of Brachas, Tractate Brachas, which is exactly what this is right here. I don't know if you can see it. There's a question of when can you say the Shema, the evening Shema prayer. Now, we know we have a mitzvah to say Shema twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. The question is, well, when is morning over and when is the evening over? When does the evening start? When does it end? When does the morning start? When does the morning end? Classic question. And that's what the Gemara deals with pretty much in the beginning, is when is morning and when is evening. So it opens up with talking about the best time to say Shema. And it says that nightfall is when the evening obligation begins, nightfall. But when does it end? So then it seems to list 3 different opinions. Like, how much time do I have? Do I have until sunset, 7 a.m.? Or do I have until midnight? So the first opinion is you have about 3 hours. So if night falls at 7, you have until 10 o'clock p.m. to say the Shema prayer, to fulfill the Torahic obligation of Shema. Another opinion, the Chachamim, the Anshe Knesset Agdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, say you have until midnight to do it. And then Rabbi Gamliel says you really have until dawn to say the Shema. And he says, anytime the Chachamim say you have until midnight to do something, and he gives an example, like burning of the offerings. The Chachamim, the men of the Great Assembly, said you have until midnight, halachic midnight, to burn the offerings. Rabbi Gamliel says they really mean you have until midnight. That's the best way to do it. But you really have until dawn to do it. Anytime they say you have until midnight, chatzot, you really have until alos hashachar, the rays of the first dawn. So, where are we holding? We're holding. You can say, the Alter Rebbe says you can say in a situation, and here's an example. In a situation where you are not going to be able to say Havadallah after a certain period of time, right after Shabbos, you can do it right after you pray Mariv. And Mariv is connected to the Ketoris. And so therefore, you really should do Mariv. According to one opinion, you can do Mariv very early. You can do Mariv 1 1/4 hours before nightfall, because it's really connected to Ketoris, and Ketoris had to be done by then. And so you can do it then. For example, if someone's traveling for the sake of a mitzvah, and he wants to save time after Shabbos by walking to the end of a tchum. What's a tchum? I'll tell you in a second. Before the end of Shabbos, he can make Havdalah beforehand. Now, I just want to explain something on Shabbos. We have a lot of things on Shabbos that are really in place, like a lot of restrictions on Shabbos, and a lot of them are in place because we don't want it to seem like Shabbos is any other day. According to the Torah, there are 39 things you're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to do. And they're like planting seeds, sowing seeds, sowing seeds, reaping plants, taking them out of the ground. Okay, most of those things, building a fire, I promise you, I probably do like none of them in a single day. So for me, Shabbos would probably look very similar if, from the Torah's perspective, it would look very similar, especially if I live in a city where I don't need to drive a car. It would look like any other day. So in order to, and back in the day, Jews, we didn't really work. Everyone, it was an agrarian society. And some people who maybe like figured it out, like they have a lot of workers working for them in their crops, in their fields, or they only work certain days. Pretty much every day for them was like Shabbos. There was no TV, there was no lights, there was no whatever. So they like read all day, they studied all day, and it looked like any other day. Shabbos really would have been any other day, except they eat like a special meal. But the problem is we have something, you have to have the ruach of Shabbos. You have to have the spirit, the rum. You have to have the spirit of Shabbos, the environment of Shabbos. So therefore, the Chachamim said they instituted a lot of extra things. Muksa. The concept of we can't move certain items on Shabbos. According to the Torah, I can move my phone on Shabbos, especially if it's off. But the rabbi said you're not allowed to move your phone because you have no use for it on Shabbos. Since I really have no use for it on Shabbos, I can't move it. I can touch it, but I can't move it. So muksa, for example, that's one example. I don't know. I can't think of at this exact moment. I can't think of a few others. I mean, millions. What was I going with this? The tchum. Okay. So one of them is tchum. What's tchum? You're not allowed to walk for a long period of time on Shabbos. In other words, you can't walk very far distances on Shabbos. So, like for example, let's say on Shabbos, you know what? I'm going to walk from New York to New Jersey or whatever. I'm going to walk a very, very far away. That's how I'm going to spend my Shabbos. Hiking in the mountains. I'm going to go hiking in the mountains on Shabbos. So you can't do that. You can't really do that on Shabbos. You can go for a hike, but you can't go for more than about 2 miles. It's about 2 miles. You can't go for more than 2 miles. Because again, and the 2 mile barrier is called tchum, which literally means like an enclosure. Like, I believe like enclosure. It's like the border. It's a border. It's a boundary. There's a certain boundary. You're not allowed to walk you can't walk past it because it seems like you're going to forget about Shabbos. It becomes about the walk and it becomes less about what Shabbos is all about, which is connecting to Hashem, unplugging from the world. It's not about my physical, material necessities and wants and desires. We're elevated on Shabbos. Everything's elevated on Shabbos. Now, something you can do is that, let's say you have to go somewhere after Shabbos. Now, this seems kind of interesting, like kind of counterintuitive. But anytime the rabbis set up a decree, they always made it like loophole situations so that we know that it's from the rabbis and we're not adding to the Torah. So what they said you could do is, if you need to get somewhere right after Shabbos, you can walk to the tchum and wait there. You can walk to the edge of your boundary and wait there until Shabbos is over, so that you'll be that much closer to where you need to go. So here's an example. So let's say you really got to get somewhere. Yeah, your wife is giving birth and she's at the hospital. And it's a little bit more complicated than this, but let's just keep it simple. And you want to get there as soon as possible, especially to like make Havadallah for her or something. But you want to get there as soon as possible. Maybe she needs like medication or she needs something from the house and you got to bring it. So you can wait at the tchum and then right away go to the hospital. The problem is you're not going to be able to carry Havadallah stuff to the hospital. If you really need to get there right away, like let's say she needs meds like right away. So you're not gonna be able to carry your stuff. So you want to make Havadallah before you leave, so that you'll be able to eat and do whatever you need to do after, right? So you got to make Havadallah before you go. So Alter Rebbe says you can make Havadallah, Davin Mar, make Havadallah walk to the tchum, walk to the boundary, and then you'll be able to go to the hospital. Because you're not going to be able to make Havdalah after Shabbos is over. However, you're not allowed to break any malacha. You can make Havdalah and do all sorts of things. So you can make Havdalah and declare that Shabbos is over, but it's not over in the sense that you can. It's not over in the sense that you can start doing malacha. You can't use the fire. You can just do besamim. I believe you can't do besamim. Did I say you can do besamim? It wouldn't make sense that you can do besamim. You would just make it on wine. We'll talk about besamim soon. Now you can do it by plag hamincha, because plag hamincha, that area, that an hour and a quarter, is already that twilight time. And that twilight time, it's unclear. Is it the day? Is it the next day already? We're morphing into the next day, which would be Saturday night, which wouldn't be Shabbos anymore. So since you're in this like quasi interesting time period, very holy, but it's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It opens up certain gateways, certain things that you can start doing if you really need to. However, the leading posek, the leading rabbi of nowadays, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who is in Jerusalem. He is the leading authority for most of world Jewry. Seems like a very special person. He says like this: you shouldn't really do it because it's the Alter Rebbe says it's a tumur l'rabim. The truth is, you can do it, but really try not to do it, because a tumur l'rabim, which means it looks weird. It looks weird. Tumur literally means wondrous l'rabim, to the masses. It's a very bizarre thing. Shlomo Luria, who is the Rashal, quotes the Bach, who says that it just people might think that it's already weekday. They might walk into you and they're going to see that somebody's making Havdalah, and like, okay, I guess Shabbos is over. And they might start doing malacha, which is pretty obvious. I think that's very true. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says like this, that he says something very interesting. What about those people? First of all, does anybody have any questions? I know it's a little technical, but I'll just take a pause for a second. Anybody have any questions? I will give you 10 seconds to ask a question. Okay, so let me just continue really quickly. Yeah, you make a lot of noise when you walk in there. The Rabbeinu Tam, like we said before, Rabbeinu Tam is of the opinion that Shabbos, that nightfall is much later. It's 72 minutes. It takes 72 minutes to go from sunset to nightfall. So there are many people, like I said, Sanzer Chasidim in Netanya, many people that hold like Rabbeinu Tam, which means Shabbos for me gets out at 9 o'clock. For them, it gets out at 9:42 or 10 o'clock, whatever it is. Depends on the time of the year. So it's much later. Now, what if they're spending, and we've had this, people who hold by Rabbeinu Tam, and they're staying for us, they're going to stay in my house for Shabbos. Now, they're not going to be able to daven with a minyan, right? Because they want to do everything later. But like, let's just say they got to get out of my house really quickly. They're sick of my house and they just want to get out right away. Can they listen to my Havdalah? Can they listen to my Havdalah, even though Shabbos is not out for them for another 72 minutes or so? Well, it wouldn't be another 72 minutes. In another hour? So it depends. If they normally hold that, like if they always follow Rabbeinu Tam, that nightfall is much later, he could. However, he should only write he does fulfill his obligation, but he should only make the bracha of the candle and the besamim much later. Yeah, he should only make the candle, but he can. He can hold Havdalah, therefore he fulfilled his obligation of Havdalah. He can't do malacha, but he can hold his obligation of Havdalah. Now, that's like that's kind of interesting, right? Because he himself doesn't think Shabbos is over. He doesn't hold that Shabbos is over, but he's benefiting from a Jew who, in his mind, so to speak, is like being over on Shabbos. I'm being machalel. I'm desecrating Shabbos. Now, obviously, they don't really hold that way, but in his eyes, like, whoa, you're, in a certain sense, like I'm taking out Shabbos an hour before you are. It's still Shabbos for you. You can't do anything. I can. It just, it doesn't seem right in a certain way, but it's okay. He can do that. He can hold it that way. And you are allowed to once in a while, if you'd like, you can do whatever you want. You can be what's called machmir, like Rabbeinu Tam. If you decide like I'm going to be, machmir means I'm going to be stringent. I'm going to hold like Rabbeinu Tam. This Shabbos, I'm going to take Shabbos out an hour later than I normally would. You can totally do that. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, this rabbi, says like this. Because for those of us, if you're being machmir like Rabbeinu Tam, if you decide to be stringent like Rabbeinu Tam this coming Shabbos, you're even allowed to ask a Jew to perform malacha, do something besides just Havadallah, but like, can you like turn on my phone and check something for me? You can ask him to do that. The Kloisenberger Rebbe, who also, I think he does follow the Rabbeinu Tam, you can that he also be doing Rabbi Kloisenberger Rebbe, the Divrei Yotziv, said those that truly follow Rabbeinu Tam should not daven Marav early, even though there will not be another minyan later. He explains that if we allow them to daven early, there's a worry that he will also do malacha, and it is also not enough reason to daven early. So it seems though you can still daven early, especially if you're just like this week, you're deciding to be machmir, stringent about Rabbeinu Tam's time. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach does hold that way, but you don't have to. If you don't, but you don't. Kloisenberger Rebbe says it's better not to. Okay, what I'm doing here, by the way, this is like a real halacha, and in real halacha, there's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of ways of interpreting a simple verse in the Talmud, and this is why there's differences of opinions, and different communities have differences of opinions. So there's a certain way. I'm giving you like a very basic way of learning halacha. Before we were learning halacha, like I would just read it and fine, and I just tell you the way that I do it, and which is great. But if you want to know, there are differences of opinions. And why does differences of opinions matter? Because sometimes it's very important to know. The more you know you can do, by the way. That's like a very important thing. It's not like the more you know, the less you can do. The more you know, that's like the more you can do. Because when somebody has like a stringency or a custom that they start doing, you can't just make a custom up. Like for now on, I always keep Shabbos 3 hours longer than everybody else. You're not allowed to do that. It has to have a source in Jewish law. And so let's say you want to take in Shabbos, but let's say you always are like Rabbeinu Tam and you always take in Shabbos. Yeah, Shabbos ends an hour later than everybody else. There are certain times when you can rely on another opinion, a much more lenient opinion, which is the opinion that most of Jewry follows, like myself, like Rashi, which Shabbos comes out 72 minutes, and about an hour earlier than yourself. You have differences of, Rabbi, can I take a medicine on Shabbos? So normally medicine we can't take on Shabbos. However, there are opinions that say if you start taking medicine before Shabbos, you can continue taking it on Shabbos. I know this is like beyond the scope of what we're kind of talking about. If you, whatever, there's myriads of things. And so the more you know, just having all these opinions, you can be reliant upon an opinion. So if like, I really need to do this, okay, there's an opinion that says you can. So in this situation, you can go ahead and do it. However, I will say, if you're an Ashkenazi, you can't follow Sephardi for the most part, and vice versa. Sephardim can't just start taking on Ashkenazi stuff. Usually the Sephardim are a little bit more, Ashkenazi have a lot more, usually like a lot more stringencies. It's not really, Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah.
You said 2 miles, and that's fine by me. I've also heard it expressed to 17 minutes
Yes.
walking.
Yes.
Is that the same
Is it 1 mil?
exact
Yeah, 18
or
minutes. Okay.
yeah, something like that?
It's about a mile. Okay, so you're talking about the tchum. Yeah, you're talking about the mill. How long you can't go for a mill?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just explain something. The whole tchum thing, it's 18 minutes. Most people hold that it's 18 minutes. Some hold it's 24 minutes. Now, I just want to explain the tchum. What does tchum mean, a boundary? Every day, every Shabbos, I used to walk from Brooklyn to Manhattan over the Manhattan Bridge. I can tell you it was like 4 miles. I used to walk over the Manhattan Bridge and I would go and speak in a shul. The reason why can you do that? Because a tchum, the boundary, the way a boundary works is as long as it's populated, it's like a populated area, the tchum, the boundary issue doesn't kick in. It's only once you leave a populated area, you're like in woods and everything like that, then you have, some say 1 mile or 2 miles to walk. That's the boundary. But if you're in a populated area, I mean, basically you can walk the entire Manhattan in a circle on Shabbos. I was just trying to keep it very simple. But let's just say you're in a place, where you're surrounded by a wooded area. You can. There's a certain boundary that you can't walk. It's about, I think is it 1 mil or 2 mil? I think it's different. It's a difference of opinions.
All right. So in exactly that example that you gave, Rabbi, what if like I'm walking with my friend, I won't mention any names, and we're out there talking about Talmud, talking about Torah, enjoying Shabbos, and oops, it turned into like 5 miles. If we said, hey, look it, we need to stop and rest and sit down here, could we use the stroller rule or something like that to
what? To walk
make
back?
it better, to make our 5 mile walk? Because
You
it
should
seems
probably
like
stay where you are. I think you're supposed to stay where
okay.
you are. You can't you gotta. I'll just explain. You brought up an interesting point. I just want to mention something. A very famous story. There's a Elisha ben Avuya, who was he's known as Acher, and he was a great sage, an unbelievable sage. And he ended up at the end of his life, towards the end of his life, he became the ultimate Apikoursis. He said, there's no God, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in any of this. And he was a teacher of tens of thousands of students. Acher, whatever. So one day he's walking with his student on Shabbos. He's with his student on Shabbos. And this is after he already is like, I'm not religious, I'm not observant anymore. And he's riding a horse. While his student is walking next to him. And they reach a certain point, and the student was lost in his mind, lost in thought, and what they were discussing, very deep concepts. Acher was a very interesting person. And at one point, Acher stops the horse and looks at a student and says, this is a tchum. You're not allowed to walk any further than this. He's like, I sense it, that we've now walked the boundary, period. And the student didn't really realize it. And then Acher, he stopped, and Acher just carried on with his horse. He didn't care about tchum, but he knew about tchum. Anyway, this is a very interesting story. The Acher was very interesting that he changed the course of history in many, many ways, and is someone that we should study. And I'll maybe we should do something about him. Okay, it's a little bit off topic. Just a story about Tchum Shabbos. It's a little bit over. Any more questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Moishi.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Woo! No, Moishi, you buzzed in quicker.
Okay. I had my fingers dry, so I was able to unmute. So anyway, I'm dealing with water here. But okay, so I've been taking Shabbos early for, I would say, about a couple of years, because my wife, eating late affects her. So she was always feeling bad the next day. So we take on Shabbos earlier,
sure.
Which means that I need to repeat the Shema.
Right.
And then during this time, the Omer counting.
Yeah.
So I don't repeat it. I say it. I don't say it during that. But so you're saying that we can actually I've never done it, but you're saying that I can actually start my riff an hour and a quarter before nightfall
Yes,
and
during the
still
weekday.
be
During the weekday
no
or on
Shabbos
Shabbos.
night. Yes, on Shabbos.
For sure.
So
Yeah, Shabbos and weekday.
Saturday
We
evening.
daven, we pray mincha. You have to pray mincha
Mhm.
before plaga mincha.
Right.
So you have to daven, let's say, an hour and 40 minutes before Shabbos or anytime when mincha comes
Right.
kicks in. But as long, and then, yeah, you can play, once you pray mincha anytime before plaga mincha, you can daven mariv anytime after plaga mincha. Yes.
Right. And by the way, on Chabad.org,
Yeah.
if you click on the time
Yeah.
in the day, they give you that it's called the zimin, is it?
Yeah.
What is it called?
Zmanim. Yeah. Times.
Zmanim. They give you the
Zmanim. Yeah.
times, the halacha time. So
Exactly.
that's good to
Yeah,
check
it'll
that
show you
out.
plaga mincha. It'll show you plaga mincha. Oh yeah,
Right.
we take in plaga mincha, I daven in shul early, but when I get home, my wife is just lighting candles.
Mm.
When I'm done with Shabbos, Kabbalah Shabbos, I've davened Shabbos already, mincha Shabbos. I get home, my kids and my wife just finished lighting candles.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of older communities they do daven earlier because
Yeah.
of that reason. A lot of more seniors community. But I'll leave it at that because I know there's another question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Aristeo, do you have a question? Okay, Aristeo. Got a client. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Good questions. Thanks a lot, guys. We will see you tonight, God willing. Be well.
Okay, I got another question,
Oh yeah,
Rabbi.
Moshe, yeah, for sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so okay, so I came to a couple of times where they asked me to be a witness. One of the rabbis asked me to be a witness during a wedding,
Yeah.
and they were like more conservative. So they did the weddings on Saturday night, and what I did was did Hamabdil, went to the ceremony, was a witness, didn't stay for the ceremony, the after party, and then came home and did Havdallah.
Sure, totally.
That's fine.
Totally fine. Yep.
Okay.
All you have to do is say Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol, or blessed be the one who separates between the holy and the mundane.
Right.
Some say you can just say Shavua Tov, and that is a separation in and of itself. Then you can make Havdalah whenever you need to make Havdalah. Sure. Yeah.
So based on the information, if I understand correctly, if I do my riff an hour and a quarter earlier, I can jump right into Hamabdil and then go out to the wedding, not worry, have to be.
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay.
Okay, you're talking about can I daven Marav on Saturday?
Saturday night, yes.
So yes, according to one of the opinions, the Alter Rebbe, you could. It's better not to, but really, really better not to serve as a witness for a wedding on Saturday night. So you can. So according to the Torah, you can get married Saturday night. The Torah very much is against, but it really doesn't want people to do that because.
Okay.
And so therefore, I don't know if it would really. I don't know if modern day authorities, halakhic authorities, would say like, this is not a reason to daven Marav early, because I'll just tell you, getting married Saturday night, even though totally allowed to, you are allowed to according to halacha. It's not. And Orthodox people will go to the wedding. In fact, I know someone that did it 3 months ago, but they shouldn't because a woman, not a woman, the people involved in the ceremony are for sure going to get involved in something not, they don't. You're going to have to get involved in malacha of like you're going to like, the person's going to be thinking about the wedding and they're like, oh, can you make sure the flowers are here? Can you make sure, like, I want to make sure the food is getting prepared? And they're just not going to be in the spirit of Shabbos whatsoever. And it's a problem. So, so we really don't try not to get married Saturday night. It's really, but anyway, but yes, in real halacha, you could daven Marav early Saturday, but really don't. There should really never be a reason to do it unless there's like an emergency.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, Aristeo, you're back, man?
Yeah, I'm back just in time. Question is there any point, like, if, let's say your family has been keeping this custom, I don't know, like I don't know what could be a good example. And then you go along and you're learning and you find out like this custom is maybe not necessary. Can you just stop doing it? Or do you have to like keep doing it just because it's your custom?
Can you give me an example? Because yes,
So the random, I guess it would depend on the custom, right? But like if you like you don't grow your payas very long, but let's say tomorrow you woke up and you're like, you know what, I really want to grow my
yeah, you
payas
could,
long.
yeah, I could.
But are there customs that you are not allowed to do that with, like that you have to stick with your
certainly Ashkenazi Sephardi customs, like rice on Pesach, I can never do that. Beans on Pesach, I can never do that. That's one that I can't. But ones that you can switch over, like a lot of people outside of Hasidim, they wear a talit, once they're bar mitzvah, but then they become Chabad, and they're not married yet. So Chabad, our custom is not to wear a talis until you're married. So what if, I saw this in yeshiva all the time, a guy basically becomes, he wants to go to Chabad yeshiva, and then he starts he's like, I want to take on Chabad customs. So I've been wearing a talis. I've been wearing a talis for all these years, every day when I pray or on Shabbos, and now I don't want to. So he has to actually go before 3 kosher witnesses and say, I want to absolve my oath. I basically took an oath. I did it 3 times. I basically took an oath. This is what I want to do. We have to absolve him of his oath, but he can, as long as he does it in that process. It depends on what types of things you had a custom for. Some things need an oath for it. Some things don't. So you have to it goes case by case.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of another one, but I can't think of another one. Okay. Good questions. All right, let's go. Okay. You guys enjoy the rest of the day. It's good to be back, and I'll see you soon.
Yesh koach.
Yeah.